Hello everyone, I was down to preach today and realised I was going to be away at my parents-in-law 50th wedding anniversary do. So, you never want to upset your mother-in-law. So that's why I'm not here. But anyway, I thought I could use modern technology to talk about today's topic, which is all about travelling light. One of my favourite stories is about a man called George Muller, who was a German man who lived in Bristol quite a few years ago now. He was a man of tremendous prayer life. He depended on God for everything. And he was someone who started up a whole lot of orphanages in the city and relied on charity and prayer to fund them. And there's a great story about one day when he'd gone to an orphanage and all the children were sitting down at tables with their plates and their knives and forks in front of them, but they had no food. And George stood up at the top of the tables with all these children there, and he said, "For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful." Absolute silence. Just then, knock at the door, milkman comes. He says, "George, my float has broken down outside and the milk will go off unless I get rid of it now. Would you like it?" George said, "Thank you very much." A few minutes later, the local baker turned up with a whole load of excess bread that he hadn't managed to sell, and he gave it to George. God provided the meal. I heard recently someone talk about a time when he felt God was asking him to give his car away. Now the problem was that he was a teacher, so how was he going to get to school? He asked around the staff room and somebody said, "I can give you a lift, but not after February the 1st because I'm going away." Fair enough. So up to the weeks leading to February the 1st, he was fine. A week before, he began to worry. How was he going to get to school after February the 1st? He was approached by a friend of his who didn't know of his predicament, who told him that he was going away for 6 months and needed somebody to look after his car. "Oh, and you can drive it, if you like." "When are you going?" he said. "February the 1st. I remember when I was a teacher and we had small babies and things were quite tight financially. And once we found ourselves running a deficit, facing an overdraft, and we were really praying as if we meant it for the first time, 'Give us today our daily bread.' My mother rang me up and she said, 'Guy, when you were young, a friend of mine took out a policy in your name and it's just matured. She'd like to know if you'd like the money.' I said, 'Okay, Mum, how much is it for?' £350, exactly the same amount that we were facing an overdraft for. Here at St. Mark's, you've had times in the past when you've experienced God providing for projects as people have given generously and the money's come in. In my last church at Emmanuel, on the eve of a gift day when a lot of money was needed for a particular project, the treasurer was feeling a bit worried about this. And he was a man who liked to recondition old sewing machines, and he used to pick them up from charity shops. And in that week, he just bought an old Singer sewing machine. On the eve of the gift day, he opened it up to find, stuffed inside it in an envelope, £1,000 that somebody had obviously forgotten about. He took it to the police and they said, "You bought the machine, that money's yours." It went towards the gift day. What do all these stories have in common? I believe they're stories of people who've really been praying in like they mean it. "Give us today our daily bread." And they're experiencing a radical dependence on God. They're travelling light. They know what it feels like when Paul writes, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." They know what it feels like to be enriched in every way so they can be generous. They're being led into a kind of relationship with God where there's no fear that he will not provide. They aren't coming to him, as it were, with their fingers crossed behind their back, hoping for the best. Jesus never had a second when he worried about where the money was coming from. There's a story in Matthew 17 where Jesus is staying in Capernaum at Peter's house, and the authorities come and ask if he pays temple tax. And Jesus says to Peter, go and fish. So he catches a fish, and when he pulls the fish out, he finds that there's a 4 drachma piece in its mouth, which is enough for 2 people's temple tax. Jesus knew that God isn't short of cash for what God wants to do. God will always provide for his purposes, and it was never even on Jesus' radar to contemplate that he wouldn't. Jesus never had a rainy day attitude either, a need to store up or save up just in case God let him down. Wise stewardship, according to Jesus, was never about keeping a comfortable cushion. It was always about using what God had given you to invest in his work. In Matthew 25, he tells the story of a master who goes away on a journey, and he leaves his servants bags of gold. One servant gets 5 bags, one 2, and one 1. The servants with 5 and 2 invest it and make 5 and 2 more, and the master comes back and commends them for using it well. The servant with 1 digs a hole in the ground and buries his bag of gold. Of course, he doesn't lose any, but he doesn't use it either. And the master is furious with him, and what he has is taken away from him. Being a wise steward in the scripture is never about arranging life so that you never effectively have to pray, give us today our daily bread. It's more about seeking to generously, extravagantly, and sometimes riskily use what God has given you for his purpose. So what does this say to us as we've been looking at our plans for the future about our heart attitude towards resources, time, energy, love and money? What does it say to you and to me? Financially speaking, last year, by the grace of God, we were pretty much able to cover our costs. 3/4 of our expenses were covered by direct giving and gift aid. But the future plans we have are asking us to step out in 3 areas. One is increasing our share to the diocese, to the level at which we pay enough for our own staff costs plus 2 posts within the diocese. When we get to that level, it will not increase anymore, but we're not yet there, so we're seeing increases in our share at the moment. But the second thing we want to do is an audit of our community, a survey of our community, to see where as a church we can be impacting it and blessing it. And of course we may well discover that we need to use money and time and resources in order to do that. And the third thing we're doing is building a team of people big enough to suit the vision that we have and the size of the church that we are. These 3 things of share and reaching out and building a team will require wise stewardship. At the moment, we're in a blessed position in that we've got large reserves. We have, if you like, 5 bags of gold. But what are we going to do with it? If we step forward in following the vision that we've been given, then in a short space of time we'll be needing to invest greater resources than we currently have as we seek God's kingdom together. Having said that, the new staff costs we're anticipating would be covered by 200 people giving £15 extra a month. The first question in all of this isn't where will the money come from? The first question has to be, is this God's vision we're following? And what's a wise steward to do? So we've set out some basic principles in deciding in future how God's money should be used. The first principle is that we want to bless our community with it. The second is that we really want to invest in plans for the future. And the third is that we want to travel light. That means to be in a place of utter dependence on God as a church. Practically speaking, this means that as a community, we don't have a rainy day attitude. We don't store up just in case. I've been struck by a story by David and Anne Redhouse about a previous church they belonged to, where at the end of each year, having spent the money that they budgeted and looked forward for necessary capital costs for the following year, If they had any money left, they didn't sit on it as a cushion, but they gave it away for kingdom work. This meant that year by year they started the year of depending on God to provide for the mission that he'd given them afresh. Travelling light is of enormous spiritual importance to us, because it's all about where our heart lies. Jesus knows that money can be a god. He knows that it can stop us from living in a place of dependence on our loving Father. It can make us too cautious to step out of the boat. That's why he says it's more blessed to give than to receive, because every time we give, it makes us more dependent on the love of God. We are, if you like, uncrossing our fingers when we come to him. As I was preparing this, I was struck by the amount of times that I've prayed, Lord, give me today my daily bread, without having to mean it. I wonder how many times you've prayed that without really having to mean it, or we've prayed it as a church. How would it feel to pray that prayer and really mean it? That would be travelling light. So as we finish looking at our plans for this stage, and during my sabbatical we'll have a bit of a break until I come back before we implement them. But as we finish this stage, then may we know that the church's money is not our money. It's God's money. We don't own a bean. And may we have the courage and the vision to invest it wisely and riskily and generously for his purpose. Thanks for listening. I hope it's come across okay.